Hi, this is your quick overview of unschooling. And so I'm going to be covering several topics, and I'm going to define what unschooling is, the difference between deschooling and unschooling. They're commonly confused. Um, if you can unschool older learners, that's a really common question. What a day looks like unschooling, the benefits of unschooling. If you're in Virginia or any other state that requires you to show evidence of progress at any point in the year, how you would show your evidence of progress in the state of Virginia, and how unschooling can be useful in healing trauma or anxiety around school in general. So to start, what unschooling is for those that do it, we kind of consider it a way of life rather than a way of teaching. Unschooling is allowing your learners to naturally discover their interests and to dive into them and research them and explore them. And once you get a good understanding of it, you realize that that's what we all like to do every day, right? Like we'll see something out in public and we'll be like, whoa, I didn't know that exists. I want to learn more about that. And you learn more about it, and maybe it leads to a new passion, a new interest. Maybe in learning about the thing, we learn elements of science, elements of history. And so that's what unschooling is allowing your child to kind of just, as they're living their daily life and they're getting out and they're doing things that they enjoy, they develop these interests naturally. And one of the benefits of unschooling is that when they develop that interest naturally, there's no pushing and pulling involved. There's no arguing, there's no fighting, because they're doing what they want to do. An example of some really beautiful moments we've had. My 11-year-old, I think he was 11 at the time, wanted to earn some money, and so I offered to let him go rake the leaves up. It was fall, and he wasn't even raking leaves for 2 minutes before he discovered some mushrooms growing underneath the leaves. And all of a sudden he had forgotten about earning money, and now he was focused on these mushrooms, and how that worked out in real time is, I'm doing work at the dining room table because I run 2 businesses. And he comes to me and he expresses this interest. Hey, Mom, I found these mushrooms. What do I have to do? Unschooling is work on the parents' part, more work on the parents than the children, because this is what they naturally do. I have to be flexible enough to get up from my job, to get up from the table, to stop whatever I'm doing, to indulge this interest, to go out there with him and explore with him, to offer resources for him to continue exploring, right? To provide him with a safe way to cut the mushrooms out of the ground. And then I suggested he forage our yard, front and back, and then also the neighbor's yard, because I knew that they would allow it. And so we went searching for mushrooms. He dissected those mushrooms on a stump in our yard, totally his idea, and then he starts asking questions about the parts of a mushroom. And so I help him Google and find reputable sources on the parts of the mushroom. And he spent his entire afternoon just completely curious and in love with this topic that had got his interest. So that is an example of unschooling. It requires listening on the parent's part, right? Which can be difficult for us because life is very stressful and we constantly have these demands for our attention, these stresses on us, these worries on us that lead us to not being as present and listening as closely as we should be when our children are expressing these interests. And that is the work of unschooling on us, is to be listening and to really hear them, and then to stop what we're doing and put that first. provide them with opportunities to explore this new interest, whether it lasts for 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 months or 5 years. Yeah, because if you have an ADHD child, then you're well aware of the quick comings and goings of interests and the hyperfocus and whatnot. So it requires us to be super available, and that can be really hard on parents today. So we covered the definition. Deschooling, all right, so we just talked about unschooling. Deschooling is no expectation of school. And in unschooling, that's similar, right? We have no expectation of school. But in deschooling, it's most useful after you leave a traumatic school experience, right? So say your child's in school, they're not being helped, they are clearly falling behind, and blame is just being placed on them and you probably, right? Maybe they're being bullied, it's traumatic. And so you leave that situation and you use deschooling to decompress and just let all of that anxiety melt away. There's no, hey, why don't we look at this math problem today? Or, hey, how about you read this book? Or anything like that. No expectations. Think of deschooling as summer break, or I don't know, if you went to public school, summer break looked like nothing but fun, right? So deschooling is essentially a summer break, and it's powerful, and it can let the learner shake loose all of that trauma. And how long do you deschool for? That's really dependent on the child and the situation, and just how largely and deeply that affected them. And that's very individual because we all take different times, different lengths of time to heal from different things, right? So you can't rush it. And I always tell people, you'll know when you know. You'll know when your child's ready. For example, just a personal example is about the time frame is I think my child, when I pulled him out, he was 10, I think. He deschooled for at least 14 months, possibly 16, 18 months. And I could see over time that fear, that anxiety, the terror really just kind of start to leave him. I could see his energy changed. He was coming back to a happier child, and that told me that we were on the right path. And you know when your child is not going to shut down at the mention of a learning opportunity. So that's the difference between deschooling, which is nothing, summer break, and unschooling, which is following the learner's interests and providing all of the opportunities you can possibly provide for them to just dive into that and explore. And you're going to find a lot of their interests, no matter what they are, be it mushrooms, a video game, a comic book, anything. You're going to find all of the core subjects, almost all, if you look hard enough, being covered in their exploration of this, right? So for example, my youngest is a huge video gamer, and he does algebra concepts in his video games, and that was one way that I was able to build his confidence. Was he loves being watched while he plays video games, right? I hear a lot of kids do. And if we allow ourselves to actually watch and actually pay attention, I saw him reading paragraphs upon paragraphs of like character information or lore or information about the weapons or the different features of the characters or the players or whatever. And then there was a lot of math involved, right? So I saw he was actually doing algebra concepts, and that was how I slowly was able to start to build his confidence back up in himself. I would gently point out, hey buddy, that's algebra. You're doing algebra. Wow. Good job. Over and over across months, right? And it's also, we have to kind of reteach ourselves and reteach them if they've been in the school system, the public school system, or private school even, what learning looks like. Reading is not just reading a book. It's not just reading a classical book. It's not just reading a book someone else deems important for you to read. Reading is on the back of a cereal box. Reading is in a video game. Reading is a comic book. So you really have to relearn what reading is, and your misunderstandings, your assumptions of what counts as reading, of what counts as learning, because another unschooling example, your kid loves to make cookies or a cake, right? Or maybe you're in the grocery store together and you see a really cool new cake mix, like Cinnamon Toast Crunch cake mix. My husband loves that, right? And the kid gets excited about it. There's your opportunity to unschool, the excitement, right? So, hey, we're gonna get this cake mix and we're gonna make this cake together. And they're excited about it. This is cool. And you teach them how to read the back of the box, the recipe. You're gathering the eggs, the oil, the water. You're teaching them to crack an egg. There's reading going on. There's reading comprehension. There's life skills being involved. You're teaching them how to read, that funky little column, at the bottom of the box where it says, like, if you're making 24 cupcakes this time, if you're making 2 8-inch pans this time, right? So you're teaching them how to read that and to select the appropriate time. You're teaching them how to start the oven, how to start the timer. You're teaching them how to safely put it in and take it out. You're teaching them how to test to see if it's actually fully cooked. So many opportunities. Just listen to their spark of interest and their excitement. Let's see, older learners. Older learners work the same way. We have this misconception that, it's hard to teach older learners. But what do older learners need to know? They need to know what we know, what we've learned that we need to know, because oftentimes, we didn't really know what we needed to know. Now we do. And as they get older, we can teach them about that, right? We can teach them the difference between a debit card and a credit card. We can teach them about interest. We can teach them about home ownership or renting. We can teach them about car maintenance. We can teach them about budgeting. Giving my kids an allowance was possibly one of the best teaching opportunities I ever had. And they're excited about it because it's money, right? But it taught them how to decide what's important to them. It taught them how to manage their money, because when it's gone, it's gone. It taught them the value of money. So, when they ran out and they wanted more, they would come to me and say, hey, how can I earn more money? And one of my favorite things is my oldest, who's about to be 16. He loves pizza. He's loved pizza since he was 6, and he can eat like a whole pizza by himself even at that point. But we've always purchased our pizzas from Little Caesars. And once he started getting his money, he got curious, and he said, well, what about Pizza Hut pizzas? And so he used his money to buy a Pizza Hut pizza, which he discovered was 3 times the cost of the Little Caesars pizza he's been buying. And so I asked him, I was like, hey, what do you think about the difference? What are you getting for that 3 times more? Is it worth it? And that's a valuable lesson. And then he was interested in checking out a frozen pizza from the grocery store, right? So there's an opportunity getting him out into a grocery store, doing a price comparison, going through the checkout. When you take your kids and go through the checkout, you look at the receipt. You can talk about what an itemized receipt is. You can talk about the tax. You can talk about your subtotal. And then going home and making that pizza. That's a life skill, learning how to make the pizza by himself. And then he got to, again, analyze, Little Caesars, Pizza Hut, frozen pizzas. That was just, a valuable skill. And another exciting opportunity giving an allowance provided us was to teach, smart consumerism. So, when they go on Amazon, they want to buy this, maybe that. And I got to teach them to look at the reviews, what to look out for in reviews, to consider shipping charges, refund policies. These are all very important concepts. And then, when they're doing these things, maybe they're discovering new passions. Let's see. Talked about older learners. Talked about what a day unschooling can look like, just following their lead and their passions and their interests. We all have a fear that our children won't learn if we don't make them learn, because that's, just what we've been taught. That's a real fear. But can you put yourself in their position for just a moment and have an authority figure over you, demanding that you learn a thing? How friendly are you going to be to that idea, to that concept, to that person, right? Like when you get a new job and they set you in this room with a video to watch for 5 hours, how excited are you? And how fair is it of us to be expecting our learners to be excited about this as well? Why? So we talked about healing trauma and anxiety around school. In the state of Virginia, we are required to show evidence of progress every year, proof of progress, whatever you want to call it. And there are two options for that. You can use a nationally normed standardized test. A lot of learners who need to unschool, who need that style of learning, often do not appreciate tests. And I know when I pulled my children from public school, I did so without knowing the law. I didn't look a second into it. So I'm always, kind of amused when I see parents online in groups and asking about, how to homeschool and this and that, because I had no idea. I just said, what, this is actually tearing them to pieces. So I don't care what homeschooling looks like. We're going to figure it out. So I didn't understand the laws when I pulled them out. But when I did read the law and the testing requirement, I freaked out for a hot second, because we are not testers. And in fact, the idea of the nationally normed standardized test is a large part of, the expectations and whatnot. Was a large part of why we left public schools. So the idea that we were going to have to continue to put ourselves in that position of discomfort was scary for me. And so then I learned about the evaluation option. And then I realized that I am qualified to be an evaluator. Anyone in the state of Virginia who holds an active teaching license or a master's degree can legally write an evaluation for homeschoolers. I do not write for my own children. It is not against the law, technically. However, I don't want there to be any question of bias, because the superintendents can choose to decline an evaluation report if they feel like there was bias there. So I just try not to make trouble for myself. So I have another mom do my kids' evaluations, but there are as many ways of completing an evaluation as there are people. So if that is an option you want to consider as an unschooling family or a homeschooling family in general, you want to talk to a few different unschoolers, get to know them, get to know their style, because they're all different. I have heard reports from families, with some evaluators requiring a fair amount of proof of work, and with unschooling, that's a bit of a difficulty, right? Because a lot of unschoolers don't have work to show, because we're out there living life, right? So how do you prove that to an evaluator? And what I have a lot of parents do is they will, and this is what I do as well, take pictures of your kids living their life and exploring and digging up those mushrooms and going to the art museum and finding seashells at the beach. If they enjoy reading, my daughter read over 130 manga books last year. I had her compile a list of all the manga books she read. If you go to museums or shows or whatnot, keep the tickets. You know, if you take a picture of your child doing a thing, you can make a digital scrapbook or a digital portfolio, or a real life one, and have your child either write down what they're doing in that picture, or they can narrate to you and you can write it down for them. You know, maybe they were at the aquarium. It was one of my youngest favorite stories, when he high-fived a stingray at the aquarium, right? Then you show a picture of them at the aquarium, and then, you know, the child might say, oh, here I learned about this fish, and really cool fact, did you know that they XYZ, right? That's a little narration next to the photo. So yeah, that's what I do personally for my evaluations for my children, and then what I see from a lot of parents. And some parents, you know, when you pull your kids out of school mid-year, and you use the rest of that year to deschool, so you still have to show that proof of progress at the end of the year, but you've been deschooling. So what do you show? That's going to vary from evaluator to evaluator. I can tell you that is absolutely not a problem for me. I have written many evaluations for families in that situation, and that was my family when we left as well. So there's no need to worry about that. I do get a lot of, I think every time I hold a webinar, one of the top questions is, or concerns, is maybe, you know, when there are two parents in the picture, one parent is completely on board with unschooling and this style of learning and the other one isn't. And the parent asks, how do I get my partner on board with this? And it takes time. And in many cases, you just kind of have to show them that this is working. You have to learn to see all of the math and the science and the history and the social studies and the reading and the comprehension. You have to learn to see that in their day-to-day activities, no matter how educational they look in the moment. And then once you're able to see that, you can communicate that to your partner, and you can point it out and say, like, yeah, he loves playing this video game all day, but have you seen how much reading he does in this video game? Say hi, Winston. So, yeah, it just takes time. It takes communication, and it takes really you understanding what unschooling is and getting really comfortable with it. And then, you know, slowly bringing your partner on board. So, as always, you can reach out to me with any additional questions. And you can reach me at email leadingwithlove2010 at gmail.com. And I hope this was super helpful.